That hurt.
All right, welcome to the Straight Red Card. The big news being that, despite some of my reservations about whether or not there'd be enough USL teams voting for this, there was a supermajority. There were 43 votes, or 42. I was told 42 or 43.
I think it was 43 according to Paul, the CEO.
I know. I got a mixed bag on that one. And that there was a supermajority that has, across both leagues, the Championship and USL League One, which amounts to 43 teams, which will be actually 15 of those are expansion teams, planned expansion teams.
Yeah.
Who also got to vote, which, kind of sways the numbers in the favor of the people who want promotion, I think, personally, because most of those teams aren't going to get the first look at the Premier League, which is what it's going to be called, not the Super League. It's going to be called the Premier League. That's
I saw a lot of mixed comments about that. People were putting is USL Division 1. I guess maybe they didn't remember. They forgot that USL basically trademarked the USL Premiership.
Yep, they already did it. So I'd be surprising if they didn't go with that. Why not? Their system's already set up like the English system.
As much as Paul mentioned how they don't, they're nothing like, the promotion relegation system that's in England. They certainly went that route, didn't they?
Yes.
And they went, the Premiership for the first division, and they're going to go Championship the next, then League One.
Yep.
And then probably League Two. I'm not sure how they're going to if they're really going to fit in the semi-pro league of League Two in there somehow.
Yeah. So I don't know if I should start here. Why did that change so suddenly? Why are all these USL teams now voting in a supermajority? Wasn't all of them. It was not every team. There were teams that were like, no, we're not. No, I'm not sure about this. But it was enough to form a consensus to get the votes they needed. I mean, the guy says 42. I can't imagine 42 or 43 voted for this, but I suppose it's possible. You had one holdout.
I thought that was the number. That was the number of teams that voted, and they got a supermajority. I don't think you said that's the number of people that voted for promotion relegation. So to be proven of a promotion relegation. There's 43 voters out there.
What's a supermajority? What's the percentage?
Usually, it's 3/4, isn't it? Isn't that what a supermajority is?
Like 75% of them?
Something like that, yeah.
All right. So you didn't get everybody. But the one thing that came across in my reaching out today about this to people I still know in USL was, well, the big difference was there's going to be a Division 1. There's going to be a Premier League. We only paid to get into the championship. And so worst comes to worst, we get relegated back into what we paid for, which was a second division team. Yeah. And a lot of them just don't see going down the road any way of them dropping any further. And I'll get into why they don't feel that way when I describe the promotion and relegation arguments they were having and what kind of system they're looking to set up. Or do you want me to go into that now?
We can go into that now. We'll watch Paul talk later. But I will say the one thing that Paul brings up in there, and I'll mark this off here, is they just simply don't have the TV rights right now. So really, is there going to be a big difference, say, if a team that was vying in the championship, which is Division 2, happens to fall into Division 3 or League 1?
Because it's all local
financial difference at that point.
It's all local TV rights. There's no major TV deal, so nobody's losing that much money going down.
TV rights is a thing of the future. It's nothing happening immediately right at the back.
And the biggest investors in USL teams with the biggest teams feel like they can spend their way out of any problem if they do get relegated, which is not going to be very easy, by the way. It seems to me the majority have agreed to a promotion and relegation system that is playoff based. So it would be the top two teams from the lower league playing the bottom two teams in a playoff. No outright promotion. You have to earn it through a playoff against the bottom two teams from the other league, home and away.
I will say though that makes getting relegated that much worse, quite frankly.
Yeah,
Assuming that the finances eventually get to that point, because you might get relegated, and then you might be contending for that playoff spot for the next 3 or 4 years before you even have it, before you actually win, move up, even though you've hit that top 2 tier.
Yeah, I'm hearing that's going to be one of that seems short-sighted to me by the big teams, because as you just said, you have a really atrocious season and you go down.
Just takes one fuck up.
They're still thinking they can spend their way back to promotion. Well, you're going to have to go play a playoff game against an upper league team to get in. Maybe the one you lost to the season before.
Yeah.
Who now are maybe spending more money or not. The other thing is there is very much a discussion on cap spending.
Really?
Yeah. It'll still be much freer than the MLS system, but at some point they do believe they have to have some sort of reasonable cap system, kind of like the NFL or they don't want to do Major League Baseball. Nobody wants to do that. Or the way Major League Baseball used to be run, which was just free for all. Doesn't matter. Go spend whatever you want. The Yankees spend, triple figures, almost $1 billion, and everybody else is spending way under that.
Yeah.
That hasn't won them a World Series in a long time, by the way. But point being, they do think there needs to be some sort of maybe Bundesliga looking setup where you spend what you have or spend a percentage of what you have, but you can never spend more than what you have. And so we'll see how that works out. I don't know exactly what they're going to come up with. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing.
Yeah. To go off that point, though, that's really just going to benefit the big markets again. I guess the big markets, because you're not necessarily talking about owner pockets. So a billionaire could take over Tulsa and only spend a percentage of whatever they bring in on a season basis.
Yeah, I do think they're going to take a look into if you are a big billionaire owner, exactly how much you can spend up front, and then discuss, how much of that spending after that year goes by. So if you're new to the league, you can chuck a lot of cash in right away. But after that, there are going to be some sort of limits. And I don't know what those are going to be. We don't know much yet. I'm just telling you kind of the snippets I'm getting here.
I would imagine, though, that at least early on, I feel like the stingiest would probably be earlier on because they need to develop some level of stability.
Well, and almost all of them have to build a stadium or expand stadium.
Yeah.
Because the limit, the stadium thing is 15,000. There are only a handful of teams that qualify for that, right?
Yeah, here we go. So off that point, here's the requirements for Division I status.
Yep.
You have to have a minimum of 12 teams, 14 by the third year, which they'll hit. That's not a problem.
They're going to start with 13 and have 14 the next season.
Exactly.
So there'll be an extra promotion out of the first season.
Yeah.
And it might be automatic. Yeah.
Okay, we'll get that in a second.
So I just want to explain.
No, we're on that topic. Let's talk about now. Actually, how would the new expansion work in that sense? Because if a team comes in, let's say a billionaire that has a team in Europe, and all of a sudden he's like, you know what, I'm going to partake in this new promotion relegation system because it's going to be cheaper than buying into MLS. Where do they start? Do they start at the third tier and have to work their way up? Can they buy right into the?
So they might be able to buy into the championship. Let's say you're the New York Cosmos.
Probably until like at least 20 teams, I'd imagine.
And you got a billionaire owner, and you already, all the stats say you should qualify for at least USL. You got a big stadium. You got a billionaire owner. You have 1 million people in your vicinity easily. So you have your own stadium that seats 15 grand. You might be listen, all this is just, they haven't even started talking about.
It's all speculation, yeah.
Yeah.
This is stuff they need to be talking about.
I'm just telling you what they're talking about, not what they have decided. What's been in the discussion, what's floating out there between owner and owner and owner, and rep versus rep as they're going to have to work this out. But they're going to start with 13 teams in that first division. Apparently, the first place team the next year will get bumped up automatically. And the bottom two will go in promotion relegation playoffs. So only one team that first season would get in auto. The other two would have to battle against the other bottom two and then you may not get anything out of that. So, but you will get one auto in to make it 14 as long as they don't bust that 75%, which they wouldn't at that point, because all the teams in the first 13, by the time we hit 2028, must meet the basic requirements of 75% and 15,000 seats. So the first 13 teams going in, the only reason there's 13 is because they're going to give an extra year for those other USL teams to meet the requirements. Now, there's some that will never meet the requirements, okay? Because the requirement of having 1 million people in your metropolitan market is just not going to work for Lexington, as an example. 745K, El Paso 168K, Des Moines combined statistical area CSA 890K. So then what do you do? Well, as we were talking off the books here, that means only 3 teams that don't make the requirements can ever qualify for
the first year,
season. And maybe the next season it'll be 4, but everybody's going to have to buck up. And the one thing, you could change and fix your stadium and make it 15,000. Anyone can do that. That's just money. But you can't force Des Moines to have more than 1 million people. So there will come a point where a team that maybe through promotion and relegation qualifies for, down the road, the Premier League. Simply, there are already too many teams that don't qualify for that million market population requirement, CSA requirement. So then it gets complicated. You earned it, but I'm sorry, Des Moines, you only have 890K.
The funny thing is, Heidenheim wouldn't qualify.
No, they wouldn't. So I think this needs to change. Why does it 1 million? That's a weird number. Why doesn't Des Moines? Des Moines has enough people to fucking support a soccer team. Almost 900K people.
In the end, quite frankly, the smaller markets, for the most part, will probably weed themselves down into the lower divisions anyways, because the bigger markets are going to be pulling in more views on TV. They're going to pull in more people in the stands in the end.
That's the assumption, Brett. But you look at a Heidenheim or you look at a Hoffenheim years ago. Hoffenheim was a fucking village. What happens if there's Heidenheim situations and Hoffenheim situations? Then what do you do when there's no space left for them and they've qualified for the Premier League? It gets really complicated because you've already used up the 75% or the 25% that are allowed to join the league who don't have 1 million people in their population CSA area.
Maybe they're going to have to go to a playoff battle with the lowest tier of that 25%.
Yeah, well, what if all those were in mid-table or higher?
Exactly, or higher. Yeah, exactly.
It gets really fucked up.
So these are all requirements that USSF posts for it, and I think, quite frankly, maybe it had its point in the day, similar to I'm not saying these are Mickey Mouse rules by any means. It's basically just to establish stability within the divisions, quite frankly. But just like the Mickey Mouse rules of MLS, maybe these need to go by the wayside.
I certainly think that the 1 million person marker needs to be dropped to at least 600,000. I'm sorry, if you got 600,000 people in your metropolitan area and you can't get 12,000 of those 15,000 seats filled, then you're not marketing very well. Mm-hmm. You're not marketing your first division team very well. And I just think you got to go big or go home at this point, because this is a bunch of people and a bunch of owners and millionaires, and not a whole lot of billionaires, but multimillionaires making a big statement. Yes, they've got time before it happens. 2028's in 3 years, or less than 3 years, but still, it's not a lot of time.
Well, that's also the other weird thing, is because one of the things they're striving to do is to go onto the international calendar. And they talked about, when they broadcasted, hey, we're going to be implementing promotion relegation, they didn't say 2028. They said 2027, 2028.
Yeah.
So that puts it even a year earlier than what people are thinking. That's like 2 seasons away at this point.
Yeah. So it's not a whole lot of time, but, I think they're diving in full bore. And listen, the other problem is the amount of teams. You got 3 divisions here: Premier, Championship, and USL League One. I can't imagine they're going to go any deeper than that. But you only have 43 teams when all of the promotion, the new teams join. At this point, currently, without the new teams in, you only have 38 teams for 3 leagues. So what is going to be the first season? It's going to have like 13 in one league, 14 in the other, and 12 in the other, or whatever the math adds up to. But it ain't going to be a whole lot of teams in each league.
Sure.
So
you're
going to have
those numbers are obviously going to increase as the years progress, assuming that everything's fruitful. You'll see expansion teams come up.
I think at least 11 of those 15 are before 2028. But there's still a lot of them that say TBA, to be announced.
Yeah.
That still could happen before 2028. So I suppose that could all work out. Even then, you have 43 teams and you have 3 divisions. And you got to divvy all those up, and I don't know how you're going to do it.
Well, remember each one of those divisions have regulations of their own. So they have to make sure that they meet their the number of teams within those divisions too.
I mean, how many of the current USL Championship teams have dinky ass stadiums? Look at this: Charleston Battery, 3,900. Hartford, Connecticut, 5,000. Loudon, 5,000.
Riverhounds. I know we can look at what you're looking at.
Riverhounds, 5,000. Rhode Island, 5,000. Like, there's some teams. So Monterey Bay, 6,000. I'm just going down the list. There's a lot of guys that got a lot of work to do.
This is a talking point that a lot of naysayers are chiming in with. Like, nobody's going to watch these teams play anyways. I'm like, well, there's a reason for that. Unfortunately, in this country, Division 2 and below, the lower leagues, there's a stigma there. It's seen as amateur. It's seen as semi-pro.
Because you're permanently relegated.
Exactly. I mean, look here in Indiana. Look at the Indians. They get decent attendance, but they paper the fuck out of that stadium. First off,
yeah.
But they get decent attendance for that right alone. But it's still considered when you say, "Hey, who's your baseball team?" Almost everybody's going to say in India is going to say the Cubs, the Sox, the Reds. They're not going to say the Indians. Because they see that as just an outdoor activity that I can go and take my kids to and have fun for the couple hours I'm there.
And when Brett says paper the stadium, you're not talking about physically covering it so it looks like people are there. What you're saying is, and this goes for a lot of professional teams, not just in soccer, you sell group tickets to corporations, groups, and so you might sell like a total of 10,000 seats to Kroger, right? And Kroger gets 10,000 tickets they hand out for whatever. I'm not saying that. I know that deal did happen once before in the past where Kroger just got 10,000 seats, and whether those people showed up or not doesn't matter. You already sold the tickets to Kroger.
Well, right? A lot of time when it's considered papering, you're right in that sense that you don't know if the people are going to show up. But basically, you have a lot of promos and stuff like that. Radio stations are handing out tickets. It's not the radio stations didn't pay for those tickets. You're saying it's free promo here. Take these, broadcast them out to your people, have whatever you want to do, and maybe they'll show up.
A good example would be Small Box. With my good friend Jeb Banner bought season tickets, 20 seats, season tickets for a whole season. I mean, maybe 5 of them showed up every game out of the 20 tickets he bought for his company. So that's what papering is.
Yeah.
But you sold the ticket, so you get to count it, right? So that's all that matters.
Yeah.
So we'll see how this works out. There's a lot of papering that goes on. But, I think things are going to have to change, Brett, for this to all work out. And there still is the prospect that U.S. Soccer is going to say no.
Yeah.
To Division 1 status.
Yeah, back to my point as far as the stadium and papering and stuff like that. a lot of people were chiming in on the division or these lower divisions not having great attendance. People aren't going to these games anyway, so why would Division One matter?
Mm-hmm.
The status of Division One makes a difference, and that's what I was saying.
It does.
More people will go to the games. I would say Tulsa could probably pull in more than 5,000 people if they had a Division One team. I'm not saying a shit ton more. I'm just saying they could probably find 7,000, 8,000 people to go to that game.
And when do we get to the point, as which happened between the old NFL and AFL, when the AFL grew and grew and grew in football, American football, to the point where the fans demanded a Super Bowl between the two leagues? Even in the USFL's short existence, back in the 80s, people were already demanding that the USFL champion needs to play the NFL champion to decide who the winner was. Well, we eventually got the AFL versus the NFL Super Bowl, and then eventually the leagues merged.
Yep.
And in the end, that might be the real solution, but we're talking 10 years, 15, 20 years down the road.
NBA too.
Yes, it did.
So
the ABA and the NBA
Yep.
went head to head. The Sixers and Indiana Pacers were an ABA team. They played with the blue, red, and white ball, and the NBA was playing with the tan one. And eventually, they had to settle it. Like, who really is the champion here? We're sick of this split league bullshit. Fans want to know who's the best. Give a first division USL Premier League time to grow. 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years. People are going to start demanding that too. Who's the real champion? Who's the real North American soccer champion?
Yeah,
and you might see some demand for that. So we'll see.
Maybe it'll be in US Open Cup.
Maybe, Brett. Maybe.
They've
more money.
First prize to $1 million.
Yeah. I mean, listen, that's a big pump up. This is JT Batson back in his big blabber, his lips, his flapping lips. He's saying, So here's the thing. I want to give JT Batson props. He didn't settle for some MLS coach. He went out there and got a good guy. Okay. And with Poach. Mm-hmm. And now we all have our criticisms, and we're going to have them. Poach is like one example, recruiting so far, which we'll get into tomorrow night when we cover the game live. But JT Batson put his money where his mouth is. He really has, and I got to give him credit for it. Mm-hmm. I know we used to make not fun of him because this is a comedy show mostly. Yeah. But yeah, we did. But we've also given him props when he's done it right. Now, the question is, does JT Batson cave because Don Garber's on the board at U.S. Soccer and not give Division I status in 2028 to USL? I would imagine the status would be given in 2027, late, because all of them are going to have to prove by the end of 2027 going into the 2028 season, they've met all the requirements. Those 13 teams have met the requirements in stadium, etc.
How do you, if you were the commissioner of USL, the CEO, if you're Paul, how do you implement an international calendar when you're not on an international calendar already? So your seasons go from, say, March or April to November, let's just say. And then you want to switch it over to an August to July window or season instead. Do you cut a season in half? You're going to have to. Do you take a half a season off and you just start in August at that point for the next season?
I think
that'd be most likely, right?
I think you'd have to take 2 to 3 weeks off in the middle of winter, and those games in November.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, finish your thought, because that's not what I was asking, but yeah.
But those games in November and those games in late January would have to all be played in the warmer climates. So you would have to readjust your schedule. So you front the schedule in the warmer times where the games are played in the more northernly cold climates. And then the games would have to be played in the more southern climates. So you might have a really fucked up schedule. Let's say if you're a team in Texas, right, where you're playing away games during the cold times the whole time, because all the warm periods, or
Vice
during,
versa.
excuse me,
Vice
yeah.
versa.
So during the cold times, you're at home the whole time. And then during the warm times, you're away the whole time, right? Because you got to go up where it's cold normally during the winter. So that'll fuck up the schedule. It'll be kind of heavily weighted depending on seasons. You're going to have to do it because that's just how the weather works. I mean, you imagine playing in Pittsburgh in January? Well, that's just ridiculous. That'd be horrible.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things where it might be a thing you might have to play an occasional cold game in cold environment. But my point of bringing that up, Derek, was not necessarily how would you adjust the season-long the international calendar for USL, is how would you go from playing a non-international calendar to playing an international calendar, because there's going to be an overlap between the two seasons. Because if you play 2026, you go from April to November, and then 2027 would be April to November, but then 2027, 28, you're going to start in August. You're cutting it right in the middle. Do you just take an additional 6 months off and then start it in August?
Yeah, that's going to be another tricky detail, isn't it? How do you make that switch?
You skip a season. you skip about 6 months of a season, and then you just start in August and go from there. Yeah, that's the only thing you can do at that point.
I mean, there's really no other solution.
Yeah.
So you're just going to be away for a while, and you hope people don't forget about you. And that's tough if that's what you're going to do by busting out a Division I league.
Here's an interesting concept. And me spitballing, and this doesn't really matter. This is kind of a pointless thing to even bring up. But they do have that new USL Cup. And if you go to in the 11th schedule, you actually said there's 9 games they play in this USL Cup throughout the season. Maybe that season, from April until August, they play the USL Cup.
Maybe just spread those games out pretty widely, I guess, and take up as much space as possible. Yeah. Listen, that's on them. Those are the detail. All the devils are in the detail, obviously.
Somebody said that to me as well. Actually, the soccer reform dude, Ted, he said the same thing to me. It was the million devils are in the details.
Not Ted Westerfeld.
Isn't he soccer reform?
Yeah, is that who you're talking about?
That's okay. He commented on one of my posts. Yeah.
Good for Ted. All right. Well, we've known Ted for a long time, not personally, but we've had back and forth with him for over a decade now. And I'm glad we're still having, I've had, back and forth with him too on X still. But listen, we'll see how this works out. I mean, this could be really interesting. I think the one thing that was really clear in the interview today with the commissioner of USL was, hey, and this is what I also got back in my feedback. Hey, we're all going to say the same thing. We're not out here actively competing with MLS. We're doing what's best for us in our league. There's nothing to do with MLS. We're not trying to kick MLS in the nutsack or anything like that, or take them on head to head. They're trying to tiptoe around this because they know there will be pushback at U.S. Soccer from MLS through U.S. Soccer to not verify their Division I status.
They're already squirming like they got kicked in the nuts.
Yeah. Right here. Great example.
Yeah. So basically what you're saying there is until we get D1 status, we're not saying a gosh darn thing.
Now, this is one of the most arrogant statements I've ever seen. An MLS club official, whoever this guy is, needs to be fired immediately.
I imagine he's got to be employed by a team that just got done paying $500 million to join MLS from USL, probably.
To say that this can't change within 2-3 years if USL do this right and change the whole landscape of how people watch soccer from the ground level up, from the floor up, you're a fucking fool, dude. Because you don't know how this works. This is a guy who is obviously not somebody who's embraced the Wrexham story or the Heidenheim story or the Hoffenheim story. This is a moron who doesn't understand how grassroots movements work.
Yeah.
MLS could completely be obliterated in 2 decades from now by a league that embraced something that so many people wanted, right?
Yeah.
They wanted consequences. They want the games at the end of the season to matter. They want to die and bleed with their club, and they want to feel the success of coming up a league and being successful and all the things and the emotions that brings with it. Like, that's powerful. When there are no consequences, it's just like you, Brett, as a Chicago Fire fan. After a while, I mean, how invested can you be? Because there are no consequences. And after a while, it's kind of just like a malaise. You're kind of like, yeah, Chicago suck again. Oh, well.
Again.
You just move on. You just move on. You watch the games, but you don't go to bed and lose any sleep at night because your favorite team lost again or they're bottom of the table again. I'm not just talking about you. I'm talking about any team that ends up at the bottom of the table. Nobody loses any sleep from that. You're just going to hope the guy invests more and come back next season again.
Last thing I'm going to bring up on the topic, and we can go ahead and call it at this point. Mm-hmm. But another thing to really make the waters murky for U.S. soccer is when it comes to the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Because as it stands right now, outside of the U.S. Open Cup, everything falls into MLS. Mm-hmm. If there's 2 Division I leagues,
there might have to be.
Why wouldn't USL say, "Hey, why aren't we getting one for our champion?" You know,
might have to be a mini tournament.
Could be, yeah, something like that. That could be an idea. Yeah.
I mean, the MLS is going to hate that shit.
No, you're forcing us. MLS loves fake tournaments.
Yeah, but they don't like ones that might expose the fact that the up-and-coming league might be getting better. Yeah. Might be getting better. And that might happen 3 or 4 years out where they're going to have to start seriously concern themselves with the fact that the USL is growing because they're tapping into the grassroots. Now, could this all be a failure for USL? Could they completely collapse? Because this is a bit. Sometimes when you make the big move, right, it fails, and
the
results are you collapse and fail completely when you make a big move like this. So they're going to have to be very systematic and thoughtful about this, because if they aren't, they're going to get munched up. They're going to get destroyed, and they're going to be attacked. And they'll start seeing MLS teams in their back markets. You'll see another MLS team in Des Moines. You'll see one in Louisville. You'll see one in El Paso. Who knows what's going to happen? Even though none of those teams qualify based on the $1 million barrier or 1 million person barrier.
At some point, imagine U.S. Soccer should step up and say, "Hey, MLS, you're done expanding. Mm-hmm. Quit trying to enforce monopoly. We can't have monopolies."
It is kind of a single entity monopoly, and I'm glad USL are doing this. I think this is a step in the right direction. They're going to have to be very careful. They're going to have to be systematically aggressive. Mm-hmm. When they are aggressive, they're going to have to be very thoughtful about how they're aggressive. And we come back to our own team. Does that mean that Indy 11 fights it out here, even though there's probably going to be an MLS team in our backyard in the next 2 or 3 seasons? Do they stick it out and say, well, fuck you, we're now USL 1 here 2028. Go ahead and build your stadium on the other side of the city. We'll compete with you.
Yeah. I mean, outside of having the deep pockets and current stability of MLS, what would a new Division I team really offer here in Indy? That people would be like, I know I've supported this Indy 11 team for 10 plus years, but I'm just going to go ahead and jump ship and go support the MLS side instead.
Yeah. And I'm not, I would gather to think, and this hasn't been told to me, so I'm not quoting anybody, that the push for Division I probably came from about 6 different teams specifically. And one of them was definitely Indianapolis, in the Indy 11. I don't doubt that for a second. I know that's always been their goal, and I know that's what they wanted to do, be a first division team. And it's the only thing that would keep them stick around. If there was no hope of that, I think they would probably fold.
With the MLS carpet ripped from under their legs. This is their only hope, really, to survive. And that's my opinion. I haven't heard anything. Derek has the connections across USL. I don't. So, but that's my take too. If they didn't have Division I status and an MLS team did come by, they would just get crushed. Absolutely. I mean, just attendance. People are going to say, "Why am I attending this semi-pro team, this amateur team? I'm going to go over here." It's going to happen.
Yep.
So D1 status is Indy 11's only hope.
Mm-hmm.
You're my only hope.
All right. I think that's going to do it. I think this is probably the most detailed breakdown you're going to get because
everything else is speculation.
It's speculation, but I mean, we have contacts.
Yeah.
Others don't. So we can tell you what the conversations have been in sort of the middle inside. And also, we've been there through this whole process. Brett and I were there to help found Indy 11, which is why we have any contacts at all going forward in this conversation. So we'll be back. If there are more updates, we'll probably have to discuss this further. But until the next time on the Straight Red Card, we'll see you soon. We'll see you Thursday.
That hurt.